Hello, welcome to our academy. This is our second video we're doing today. It's about percentages and what are percentages. We're doing these short videos because of the COVID-19 coronavirus, so that it keeps children occupied. But obviously it's Key Stage 2 and it's for Year 3s between 7 and 8 years of age, but anybody can join in, so I don't mind anybody watching it, even adults, because you can never learn enough in mathematics. Anyway, we're going to crack on. So what is percentages? What is percentages or percentage? Percentage is a part or fraction of a 100. So say 1% of 100 equals 1, and 8% of 100 is 8. 16% of 100 is 16. So this is easy because you're obviously looking at it as 100, so it's out of 100 is always going to be the same as whatever the percentage is. It gets a bit more complicated if you've got to do a percentage of more than 100, because then you haven't got any reference point to it. So if we then now go to, say, 20% of 80, for argument's sake, we can either go straight in and just times that 80 by 20, which is 160, add another 0, so that's 1600. And then we can divide by 100, because that's the formula for working out percentage. We cross the zeros off and we're left with 16. So that would be your answer. Or we could do it another way, and that would be 10% of 80, which again we can do 10 times 80, which is 800. 10 times 80. And then divided by 100, which is 8. And then because that's 10 and that's 20, instead we have halved it, so we now have to bring it back up to 20, so we have to double it, so double this. So that then equals 16. So that's your two ways of doing things. Best thing to do is, if you get a percentage, simplify it by what you do understand, so bring it down to like 10% or 5%, what relates to, instead of bringing that up. To bring that up to 100% is more awkward than just doing 10% of this and then doubling it. That's my way of thinking. So if we give you another one, so you get the hang of it. Say 15% of 60. Of usually means, if you look at of, it usually means times. Because once you times it and then you divide by 100, it'll give you the percentage automatically. So if somebody says to you 15% of 60, it basically means 15 times 60 divided by 100 will be your answer. So two ways of doing this, like I said. So 15 times 60 is going to be a bit awkward. It can be done now. So 6 times 50 is 90. And then add another 0 on the end of it. I'll make it 900. Then divide that by 100 will equal 9. You'd cross the zeros off or make them disappear if you've got a board like this, makes it easier. 9 over 1 is 9. Okay? So it makes sense anyway, because 15% of 100, which is a larger number, would be 15. So you're looking at around about 9, which is, if it was 50, 15% of 50 would be 15% of 50 would be 7.5. So basically it'd be half. So 9 is good. The other way to do it, which I think is easier for guys if you want to do it that way, is 5% of 60 and then times it by 3. The reason why is 5 times 3 is 15, so or 15 divided by 3 is 5. So if you lower this by dividing it into a number, which you want to make it easier for yourself, then you'll have to multiply it after you've got the answer. So 5% of 60 is quite easy, because 5 times 6 is 30, plus the 0, that's 300. Divided by 100, like I said, you have to divide it by 100 to get your answer. So cross off them. You've now got 3. Now times it by 3 equals 9. And it goes back to same answer. So like I said, 2 ways of doing it. Either you can go straight in and multiply it with a larger number, or you can use a smaller number and then multiply it back up to get the same answer. Just makes it easier for you. Anybody not understanding anything what I'm doing, you can always leave a comment and I'll go through it again, that particular question or that particular part of it. Or I can do a one-on-one Skype if you leave your details. Don't mind it. So if we do something, another one, say, let's do 30% of 180. Okay. So it could be £180 using money, or 180 pence, which would be £1.80. So however, whatever works for you. Money works for me. I always love working with money, with percentages. Makes it a lot easier. But whatever works for you. So to do something like this, again, you can jump in and you could say, oh, 30 times 180 divided by 100, which I think is a little bit hard. If you're like a 7-year-old, I mean, you know, I don't expect too much of 7-year-olds, but, you know, we can do it as adults. It's not too difficult, but the quickest way, I feel, and the easiest way for a child to do this would be to bring this down and divide it until it comes to 10. So dividing it by 3 will bring it to 10%. So 10% of 180, yeah, is basically going to be 10 times that, which is just adding another 0. That's how quick it is. It's very simple. And then you can just divide it by 100, just take the zeros off. When you've got experience, you don't even have to do that. You can just say 1800, take the zeros off. That's it. You don't have to do the divide by 100 because you know it's there and it's a quick shortcut once you've got practice. But 18 is your answer, and then once you've got your 18, then the second part of it, obviously, you'd have to, with the question originally, this is originally the question, so you split it up, A and B. So the original was that, So we have to come back to that. So we have to times it by 3. So 18 times by 3, 54. So there's your answer. If you did it the other way, 54, 0, and another 0, because there's a 0 there and a 0 there, 2 zeros. Divide by 100, 54. But again, it's simplicity we want, so always go for the simple way of doing things. Once you've got experience, then obviously you can go into doing shortcuts, and eventually you can do it in your head. Because percentages are not really difficult, it's just people make them difficult by going the wrong way about it. Okay, moving on, typical question you might have is a dinosaur, nice big dinosaur. The length of the dinosaur is 300 centimeters of this dinosaur. Let's say 300 centimeters on a drawing. And we have a smaller dinosaur, baby dinosaur, which is 12%. Okay? 12% of the big one. So that's a typical question. So how would you find that? A couple of ways of finding that. You could just times that 12% by 300 and divide by 100, which we're going back to when we were doing percentages anyway. So the question would have been something like 12% of 300 whatever, pound, pence. We just done that. So if we're looking at this, the straightforward way of doing it would be 12 times 300, which is 3600 divided by 100 is 36. That's the forward way of doing it without going into simplicity. But the simple way to do it for a child, which is obviously not going to be as quick as that, so the simple way for them would be to cut this one down to 100. So we go to 100 centimeters, yeah, which would be a third of this. And then later, when you get your answer, times it by 3. So 12% of 100 is very simple, equals 12. Remember? We're going back now to when I said to you, what's 1% of 100? Equals 1, and 2% and so on of 100 equals 2. So if 1% of 100 equals 1, then 12% of 100 will equal 12. Now all you've got to do is times that now by 3, because there's 3 of them 100, if you pretend there's 300 centimeter dinosaurs in the 300 one. Yeah, so you'd have to times it by 3. And 12 times by 3 equals 36. Same answer, look. Simple, yeah? Another way you could do this would be to divide that 300 into 1 centimeter, like 1 centimeter would equal what? So if you divide it by 300, you'd have to drive, it's getting a bit complicated then really to do that for a child, so I won't go into that at this stage. We'll do cover that one in part 2, I think, because keep it simple, bring it down to 100, then times it by 3 to get it back up to 300, or you can just pretend and split this into like 3 and just say 100, 100 and 100. Work on 12% of 100, which is 12, and then times it by 1, 2, 3 to get to that. That's it. Keeping it very simple. Okay. You can move on to another one. These are like typical sort of questions that you might get. So let's say what is 1% of 500, yeah? 1% of 500. And then we could do something like 50% of 600 is a sort of typical sort of thing that you can get. Quick way of doing this would be 1 times 5, forget the zeros, 5, and your answer is 5. But we can't get to that yet because obviously that's a shortcut, and that's a shortcut because if you know percentages, you're going to do these sort of things in your head. But when you're explaining to a 7, 8-year-old how do you work out something like that, you have to keep it a little bit simple. So just bring that down to 100, like I said, that's your key. And same with this one, bring it down to 100. And then to get that back up to 500, you just have to times that, whatever the answer is, by 5 to bring it back up to 500. So 1% of 100 is easy, equals 1. And then 1 times 5 equals 5. So you can see the pattern now. So same thing with this one, it says 50% of 600. So this one you can bring down, because there's a larger number here, you can bring that down to 10% and work it out and times it by 5. Or you can bring that one down to 100 and times it by 6. So let's do it one way and let's try the other way. You should get to the same answer anyway. So if we bring it down to 100 and then say 50% of 100, 50% of 100 would mean half of 100. And that would equal 50. Yes? Then we just times it by 6. 6 times 5 is 30 equals 300. So 50% of 600 would be half of 600, which is 300. Now if you do it the other way, let's bring that down to 10%. So 10% of 600, yeah, would be 6. It's 10 pence in every pound. So if that's £6, yeah, so 10 pence on every single pound. 10 pence, 10 pence, 10 pence, 10 pence, 10 pence, 10 pence. It's 6 of them. So there you are. Just draw 6. 10 pences. There. That gives you 60 pence. So we just put down 60. Okay? Now that we've got 60, the question actually was, what is 50%? So now we have to times that figure by 5 to get 50%. So 60 times 5 equals 6 times 5 is 3, 0, 0, which is 300. So now we've got the same answer. So I hope you understand that now. Let's go on to a realistic question that normally you might get in a test. This is one of the questions that I come across, which I quite like. I hope you like it as well. So it says Brian the mole is conducting a survey. Okay, and out of his $100 friends, 25 are blue. 25 are blue. And 75 are red. Okay. What percentage are blue? What percentage are blue? So there's a few ways you could answer that. You could draw yourself a pizza and you could split it into 4 quarters, and then you could label it %, which is 1 quarter. There's your 25. And the reds, 25, 25, 25. So 25 plus 25 is 50, and 50 is 100. So this is worth 100, which is the friends. And if you divide it by 4, so you got 25 in each. Now you've got red, which is 75, and blue, 25. So percentage-wise, is percent, blue is 25%. So you answered the question quite quickly. So basically, they're saying 25% of 100 is a 25, and 75% of 100 is 75. The other way to work it out would be by using a scale or a graph, some sort of graph. So what we could do is draw. So we've got one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now we've got, this is 100%, which is 100 friends. And then we have 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 0. So basically, if you put your friends in, in blue, it relates to 25. That's what it says. So there's your friends. And your other friends, from there to there, is 75. So if this is a percentage, 0 to 100, then this is 25%, and this is 75%. Or the other way to do it would be to go the old-fashioned route, where we just covered before, which was 25 of 100 is 25, and 75 of 100 equals 75%. Because coming back to what we said before, 2% of 100 is 2. So you can see the relationship between the percentage. As long as this is 100, the percentage will be exactly the same as the number. So 2% of 100 is 2, and 2 over 100 is 2%. Same. So therefore, 25 of 100 must be 25%, because this proves it, and 75 of 100 must be 75%. So moving on to another question. Typically multiple choice questions, which might help as well. You get a lot of early stages of doing percentages. Multiple choice is good. They're a bit easier and make the mind a bit stronger to keep them going. So Angie got 80%, got 80% in her maths test. Okay? And Joe, which is her friend, got 20 marks, 20 out of 25. So the question was, who got the highest? Who got the highest? Marks. Who got the highest one? So it's multiple choice, so the choices are Angie, Joe, or both the same. So to get to your answer, you'd have to work it all out anyway. There's no use saying, oh yeah, guessing. So it's really that you have to work out on both of these to get any sort of answer, to be sure which one's right and which one's wrong. So it's quite easy to say, let's do the first one and split it up. We'll do this one first, A, put a line through it, make it simpler, and then B. And the final, the answer would be on that one, which it says who got so we put label as C, who got the highest marks. So if we work on A, Angie got 80% in her maths test, So 80% of 100, 80% of 100 equals 80. So we know that, yeah? Coming back to what we said before, say 2% of 100 equals 2, then 80% of 100 will equal 80. Yeah? You're used to that by now, I hope. So then coming back, we've answered Angie's. Now coming back to B, and Joe got 20 out of 25. So we need to increase this 25 to 100. So how are we going to increase that to 25 to 100? We times it by 4. So if we times this by 4, we get 100. Okay? If we times that one by 4, we need to times this one by 4 as well, which makes 20 times 4 equals 80. 80 out of 100. So in relation to a percentage, so if 80% of 100 is 80, we obviously need to bump these figures up because 20 out of 25 is not going to work. So we need to find out what out of 100 is. So that means they would have had to do 4 times the amount of questions. So if it's 25 questions and you get 20 right, if it was 100 questions, how many would you get right then? That's how it works. So we do 80 out of 100 and 80% out of 100 is exactly the same. That is 80% as well. So the answer would be both the same. There is another way of doing that one, second one. So we could have done this when we went to do 10% of, before when we done 20% of something. We did it, halved it to 10, like that, and then doubled it later, if you remember. So if we was going to do 20, say, percent, like 20 out of 25, let's say half this one to 10. Now we do 10 out of 25. And then times it by 10. No? Times it by 8. So we'd have to times that one by 4 first to get it to 100. Times by 4 equals 100. And now because this is half, we're doing 10% of 100. 10% of 100, or 10 marks out of 100, equals 10. So 10% of 100 equals 10. And then you just times that by 80 because you have to get that to 80. Times by 8 equals 80. So that's the same as that. So that becomes the same as this, and that becomes the same as that. There's a few ways of working it out, but I would keep it simple. What I would just go for times it by 4 and times the other side by 4. You could even just split it in half. So you could do 20 out of 25, split it in half like that, and just experiment with it. Let's say okay, we double this one is 40, double that one is 50. Okay, so now it's 40 out of 50 marks. But this one's out of 100, so we'll say, okay, let's double this one again, so that's 100. Now we double this one as well, it becomes 80. Do you see how many ways that you can work this out? It's really quite easy. So coming up to the last question now. Now that you know how percentages work, or more so how it works. Like I said, if you're still not sure, I'll go through it. Just comment below. Don't be shy. Tina eats 200 kg of lettuce and veggies. Tina, by the way, is a rabbit, so I'll put in Tina the rabbit. So Tina the rabbit eats 200 kg lettuce and vegetables a year. Okay? So %, of she said 80% of her diet is vegetarian. In other words, vegetables, which is those. So we need to find out %, of that. The rest of the 200 kg, 80% of it is vegetables, but lettuce, veg and other. And the vegetarian bit of it, which is veg, which is like carrots, lettuce and stuff, out of the 200 is vegetarian. So we need to find out what is that 80%, how many kg of that 200 does she eat as a vegetarian diet. Okay? So, how many kilograms? It says how many kilograms kg is her diet, a vegetarian diet. Okay? So the answers that we got was 80%, 80 kg, not in percent, it's in kg, right. The answer's in kg, 80 kg, 150 kg, or is it 160 kg? So to work on this, we need to find out first what 80% of 200 is. So if we go back to basics, what we did earlier, we did 80% of a number such as, say, 200, we can just jump straight in, remember? 80 times 200. But 80 times 200 might be a bit too complex, like I said. So let's make it a little bit simple. Let's do 80% of 100, which is a lot easier. Because you know anything of 100 is the same number, yeah? So 80% of 100 kg equals 80, yeah? And then, because we halved it there, we have to double it back up, the answer. So 80 times 2 equals 160. So that's nice and easy. And we know the answer now is this one. So if you can't work it out that way, there's another way to work it out. And that would be 80% of 200 kg. We can do now 10% of 200 kg. Yeah? And then times it by 8, because that's 80. That's 8. Times it by 8. And you get the same answer. So let's try it. 10% of 200 equals 20. Yeah? 10% of 100 is 10, so just double it. Yes? Once you got to 20 now, just times it by 8. So 2 times 8 times by 8. 2 times 8 is 16. Bring the 0 in, 160. So the same answer. Okay guys, so that ends our lesson, our second lesson. And stay safe, stay at home, keep out of trouble, and like, share, and subscribe. And we'll hopefully have another lesson tomorrow, and we'll be doing quite a few of these videos. Okay, over and out. Yeah.